everybody. My name is Alex Anderson, and I'm here at Crystal Cove State Park, a California state park down here in Southern California in Orange County. And I'm so excited to invite you down to the rocky shoreline today for a PORT home learning program. PORT stands for Parks Online Resources for Teachers and Students. And I'm joined today with our friends from the Crystal Cove Conservancy, Kaitlin. The Crystal Cove Conservancy is our nonprofit partner, and today we're going to be learning about monitoring human impacts here in our tide pool habitat in our marine protected area, or MPA. So today I'm going to start here at a very busy portion of our park, a very high impact area, and then we're going to learn what is an MPA. We're going to dive into that topic, and then we're going to think about some of the human impacts that might be happening here in our tide pool area. And then finally, I'm going to send you down the beach to a much less visited area, a lower impact human activity area where Kaitlin is. Kaitlin, sorry, I didn't introduce you. Do you want to say hi? Hi to
Hello,
everybody.
everyone. Hi, I'm Kaitlin. I work for Crystal Cove Conservancy, and like Alex said, I'm here up the coast from Alex at a completely different beach from where she's at. So I'll have your help a little later at this part of the beach, and for now I'll throw it back to Alex.
Yeah, so we're going to travel down the beach a little bit later, and you're going to be able to collect data about owl limpets, which is a sea snail in our tide pools, and that's going to shed some light on the human impacts that might be happening in our MPA. So today you won't be able to ask questions during this webinar, unfortunately. Do have a piece of paper and a pen, because you're going to be able to collect data later that you can submit to help us learn about the health of our marine protected areas. Thank you so much. This program is geared for middle school, high school students, and it should last about 45 minutes. Okay, so where am I right now? I want to show you where we are located here at Crystal Cove State Park. And because we're a California state park, we want you to come and visit to our park. Here we go. Okay, so here we are. We're located in Orange County down in Southern California. This is a very busy and populated county, so lots of structures and development. So it's really special that we have this protected open space here with Crystal Cove State Park. Here at Crystal Cove, we have 2,400 acres of backcountry wilderness with wonderful hiking trails. If you like to go bird watching or mountain biking, you can even bring a horse and ride a horse in our backcountry here. There's wonderful wildlife that you can see. This is us hiking. Here's our California state bird, the California quail. And beautiful wildflowers and plants you can see in our backcountry. Also, we have 3.2 miles of coastline. This is where we have our sandy beaches and rocky shoreline. Lots of different wildlife viewing. You can see our bottlenose dolphins, common dolphins. We see whales. You can go scuba diving here, go swimming. There's our California state marine fish, the Garibaldi, and wonderful birds to see. This is an osprey carrying a fish. We also have a tide pool habitat here, tide pool ecosystems. This is part of our marine protected area here at the park. And if you explore, there's wonderful wildlife that you can see here in our tide pools. This photo was taken by one of our volunteers, and I think it's gorgeous. These baby green or baby aggregating anemones next to the volcano barnacles. All right. So we also have a different area of the park that receives a lot of visitors, and this is called our historic district. And that's where I'm standing right now. This is a cultural area in our park. It's a collection of 46 cottages that have been historically restored to the period of 1930s, 40s, 50s, and you can rent them out through the California State Park system as campsites with your family. You just visit reservecalifornia.com. So this is a very busy area of the park, a lot of human impact because there's a restaurant, there is a gift store, and it's just really fun to walk around the charming cottages. They're kind of like a history museum sitting on the sand, teaching us about the ways early Californians lived in the early 1900s. So here I am. I'm standing, actually, if I move around, you can see, in the historic district. So behind me, we have these cottages right here. And over here, we have our tide pool habitat right next to our busy area of the park. And all of the water adjacent to our park is called a marine protected area, or MPA. What is an MPA? Well, MPAs are like protected wilderness parks on land, just under the water. These are areas along California's coastline that have specific rules and regulations that protect marine wildlife and habitat. They encourage biodiversity in the ocean, and they also limit human impact. When we talk about human impact, we're talking about the effects that humans can have on a natural ecosystem, either directly or indirectly. And I'm going to show you some slides here. So marine protected areas are like wilderness parks on land, just under the water. There are 124 MPAs that act as a network throughout the state of California. We have one of the largest and most cohesive networks of MPAs in the world, protecting about 16% of our waters here in California. And while there are rules and regulations for these places, there are also places where you can bring your family and your friends and you can enjoy. You can go surfing, you can go scuba diving, sailing, even fishing in some places. And there's education and research opportunities here in our MPAs. And not all MPAs are the same. So there's different flavors, if you will, of MPAs. Here we have a state marine conservation area. We're the third one down. So we do allow some fishing here of particular species. But if you were to go just south of us, south of our waters, we are connected to a state marine reserve MPA in Laguna Beach. That means there's no collecting in a reserve. Absolutely no fishing. We do allow some fishing in our reserve. But while we do allow fishing, everything in our tide pools is protected. Oh. Sorry about that. And MPAs protect a number of different kinds of underwater habitats. So these are the different habitat types that are protected by MPAs in California. We have the kelp forest, we have soft ocean bottoms, intertidal zone, another term for our tide pool habitat, estuaries, submarine canyons, and rocky reefs. So I was mentioning that MPAs promote biodiversity. So how do they do that? Well, first, let's break down biodiversity. Bio meaning life, diversity meaning variety of species. And biodiversity is really important for ecosystems. Biodiversity, the more opportunities for the organisms to find shelter, to find mates, and to reproduce, right? So we want more biodiversity. And how do MPAs do that? Well, a lot of marine life in the ocean actually take a really long time to reach sexual maturity, all right? So for instance, our California spiny lobster can take 3 to 5 years to reach sexual maturity. That's a very long time for them. A leopard shark can take up to 10 years to reach sexual maturity. So by protecting complete underwater habitats, MPAs give these species space and time to grow larger. And then in some cases with these animals, they will, as they grow, they can reproduce, they can give off more offspring if they're bigger. So by protecting these underwater homes, we give them space to grow big and fat and provide our ocean with lots of offspring reproduction so we can build a biodiverse coastal wilderness here in California. So the hope is that all of the offspring that is produced will spill over into neighboring unprotected waters. So here, that's called the spillover effect. Here's a good image from the Ocean Conservancy. If you look on the right, we have a marine protected area and then an unprotected area. And so hopefully the fish and offspring that's protected will, go across those lines and replenish the coastline in unprotected areas. Also, there are some species that are most likely to benefit from MPAs. A huge list of these organisms, but I have some here. And the reason is that most of them are home bodies. So they have a very small home range. And because they're in these home ranges in the MPAs, are more likely to be protected and reproduce. And note this owl limpet, which we will be talking about in a little bit. All right. So know if MPAs are working, right? MPAs were implemented after a long process that started in 1999, but our more local ones were implemented in 2012. So how do we know if this is happening with biodiversity? Well, there are a lot of monitoring efforts happening throughout the state. Scientists are monitoring fish populations and water quality. And with some of these programs, everyday citizens like you can become citizen scientists and help these scientists extract data from the coastline. So you don't need to have a science degree. You can come and help monitor our MPAs. So we're going to be focusing on the tide pools here in our MPAs. And Kaitlin is going to be, later I'm going to send you down pretty soon to Kaitlin. You're going to be taking data about these owl limpets to kind of see, to shed some light on the human impact here in our tide pools. But I just want to go over tide pool habitats a little bit and owl limpets before I send you down to Kaitlin. We're also going to talk about human impact here in our tide pools. Thank you for your patience as I grab these photos. Okay, so here at Crystal Cove, we have 4 different tide pool locations. You can find tide pools anywhere there's a rocky shoreline on the coast at low tide. So we have 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day here in California. These 2 photographs were taken at the same beach, just at different times of the day. There's about 6 hours in between our high tide and low tide. And at low tide, we have these pools of seawater trapped inside of the rocks. And if you peek inside, there's a whole wonderful world of life. All of these dynamic organisms are all struggling to survive in a very, very harsh environment. Oops. So it's really harsh living out here in the tide pools. Can you imagine you're a sea star? You have the waves crashing on you. You have the sun beating down. Then you have people, right? So we're talking today about human impacts in our MPAs. And I want you to think about, why do you think this particular marine habitat would be more vulnerable to human impact? So take a moment and think about that. Why? Well, these habitats bud up right next to our communities, right? So we have communities up over this cliff right here. And if any pesticides or oil are on the streets and then it rains, you know, our tide pools can be exposed, but also I can see some people already exploring over here. If you go to the beach, it's just very easy to access the tide pools if it happens to be low tide. So we get a lot of visitation here at Crystal Cove. We actually see about 2 million visitors a year here, and many people like to explore on the rocks. Now, what kinds of human impacts do you think might be happening here in our tide pools with all that wildlife and all of the people exploring? So we're going to go over this. These slides are hard to look at sometimes, the human impact. Okay, so this is a busy day here at Crystal Cove State Park. This is a photo taken where I'm standing, just looking north up the beach. So you can see that a lot of people will come and visit our tide pools. And here's another photo. This was not taken in our park, but it's a good example. I want you to look around and see and notice how these people are interacting with the tide pool habitat. I'm noticing some boots in the water, not staying on the dry rocks, but maybe stepping on organisms or trampling. I'm noticing some buckets. Maybe these animals or organisms are being removed from the water, taken out, and that can be detrimental to them. I might see somebody maybe poking an animal down there on the rock. So a lot of exploration can lead to human impact. This was a photo taken in our park ago. This kid didn't know that sea stars have tube feet on their bodies, and if you rip them off with the rocks, it can rip off their tube feet. And of course, he didn't know that, but these are the kinds of human impacts we see here in the tide pools. Also, after the pandemic, recently there was a surge in people going to the tide pools to forage for food. It was a fun pastime for people to go to tide pools and pick off the limpets and the sea snails here in the tide pools. So that's why here in our marine protected area, our state marine conservation area at Crystal Cove, we have certain rules that we follow in order to protect all of the organisms. So we never remove the animals, shells, or rocks. We don't pick them up. We want to walk gently, taking care not to step, and never turn over rocks. And then some animals in the tide pools are collected and taken home just because they're pretty. So has anybody ever seen this shell before? I'm going to step over here actually, so you can get it in the light because they're really beautiful. So this is a shell was melted into this, and they're so pretty that people always want to take them home for their shells. Also, people eat them for their meat. But because of that, now there are two species of abalone that are endangered. So they're at risk of becoming extinct, the black and the white abalone. I'm going to show you some photos now. Sorry. Of our abalone. So yeah, historically, they've been overfished, overharvested. So this is a postcard from Santa Barbara. I'm not sure the year, but you can see all of those empty shells behind. They were taken for their meat and their shells. This is a photograph of a building that was created in Hollywood, I believe, and they decorated the entire building with shells of abalone. Also, people buy jewelry with abalone. And then I found this, and this is an ad for a lamp. And those are not abalone shells, but they're the shell of another animal we have in our tide pools. Those are limpet shells. And those are the animals you're going to be helping Kaitlin collect data with today. So our limpets are sea snails. I'm going to give you a little overview of our limpets. Limpets are sea snails with one shell, and they can grow to be about 4 inches long. They're the largest limpet in North America, and they have a rasping tongue, a radula, that they use to scrape algae off of the rocks. And because they do that, they're very territorial. So they graze their farm. We call it an algal farm, their little area where they graze with their rasping tongue. And that creates these open spaces. So you can see that limpet kind of, it's hidden over here. It's created this whole open space. And that way, because they nudge off barnacles and other limpets, they make it so that not only one species takes over the entire intertidal zone. Oops. Oh, I'm gonna have to undo that. So here's another example of our limpet. And also, so limpets, this is really interesting, they're all born males. And then at about 2 years old, they reach sexual maturity. And if they live long enough, some of them will become females. So we really want to protect those big, fat females because they can reproduce more. And but unfortunately, they're the most likely ones that are taken because they're big for their pretty shell or for their flesh and their meat. All right, so now I'm going to send you down the coastline a little bit north of here to a more quiet area, so with less human impact. Here we have a high impact zone, and we're gonna meet with Kaitlin from the Crystal Cove Conservancy. Hey, Kaitlin.
Hello, Alex. Hello again, everyone. If you missed at the very beginning, my name is Kaitlin. I work for Crystal Cove Conservancy, and we are the nonprofit partner of Crystal Cove State Park. So we help out the state park with conservation of the natural resources. We help with education, and also helping to preserve and restore those historic cottages that Alex talked about a little earlier. And one of the ways that we do help with conservation in the park is by studying the impact of MPAs and seeing if they're working. Are our populations of animals here actually doing better since the MPA system was put into place? And one of the ways that you're going to help us do that today is by studying our owl limpet populations. So I have an owl limpet shell here, and you might wonder like why this very unassuming snail is so interesting for us to study. But Alex actually did mention a few of those reasons. One of them is that they are a souvenir species. So they're very frequently taken. So they're they're some of the species most likely to be impacted by people taking them, especially for food, so people coming to forage. When they are taken, they're also generally taking the largest limpets. You can imagine if you want it for a meal, you're gonna look for the easiest ones to find and also the ones that are gonna be the most delicious and filling and worth your while. So that can lead to declines in our population when those largest sexually mature owl limpets are no longer there. Their population could completely crash. But we aren't sure if that's happening or not. We're not sure if there's a lot of take happening in those tide pools. So that's what we're going to be studying today with your help. You're going to help us as community scientists conducting an owl limpet survey. And the main way that we do this is that we have 2 research sites here in the park that we regularly collect data on. So one of them is where Alex was located, where you saw all the people behind you, and one of them is behind me. So this is going to be one of our owl limpet monitoring sites behind me where we're going to collect data today. And I'm actually going to share a picture of the 2 sites side by side so we can take a moment to compare the 2 and see if we can figure out what is so interesting about the 2. All right, so here is our historic district site where Alex is, next to where I'm located, which we call Little Treasure Cove. So just take a moment to look at the historic district and Little Treasure Cove. What's different about them? Why do you think we would want to study owl limpets in these 2 different sites? The really big thing that totally stands out to me is that the historic district, of course, has lots of people on it. It is also much easier to get to. There's, of course, the historic district, there's a restaurant. It's easier to park closer to this area. Here at Little Treasure, it's a much longer walk to get to. And you might also notice that it's in a little protected cove. So you actually can't really get there unless it's a very low tide. So it sees a lot less foot traffic. So as you can see behind me, this beautiful area here doesn't have any people in it. And that's because our tide is far too high. You'd have to do some serious cliff climbing to get there. So it doesn't often see as many people. So if we compare the owl limpet populations between these 2 sites, it tells us, is our MPA working? Are there negative human impacts still happening at one of those sites? So we're going to collect some data today, but before we do, I actually do want to hear from all of you participants today and get a prediction about what you think is going to happen at these 2 sites, if you think that there will be a difference in our owl limpet populations. So we have a pretty interesting tool that we're going to use to get your thoughts. It's called Mentimeter. So if you have a either your phone, maybe another tab in another browser, an iPad, any way that you can go to menti.com, and then you can enter in the code 6478395, and that will get you to this slideshow. And then on your phone or another browser, you'll be able to answer questions that we pose, and they'll show on the screen. So that's a great way for us to share our thoughts today. So I am going to give you all a little bit of time to go to menti.com and get into our Mentimeter slideshow. Once you're there, you can respond to the poll to let us know that you're in. I see we have 2 people in already. That's excellent. I'll just give you some time. The login information will also always be at the top of these slides. So if you do miss it while we're on this slide here, don't worry about it. The information will be there for all of our polling questions. Very exciting to see all our little dots coming in. Excellent. I have 6 people in so far. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next slide with our questions as you are coming in. Again, I'll keep the numbers at the top. But I'm curious where you think we will find more owl limpets, at Little Treasure Cove or at the historic district. So Little Treasure Cove is where I am, the lightly trafficked site, and historic district is the busy site where Alex is located. So far, it looks like 5 people, everyone seems to agree at this point that we're going to have more owl limpets at Little Treasure Cove. That's really interesting. So think about why you might think that. Might have something to do with, you think the human impact in the historic district might have a negative impact. That's really interesting. Everyone seems to be in agreement upon that. That's great. And then a similar but slightly different question, where do you think our owl limpets are going to be the biggest? Where will we have more big owl limpets compared to really small ones? Again, historic district or Little Treasure Cove. Great, everyone answering so quickly today. And it seems we're in agreement again that we're going to have the big owl limpets here at Little Treasure Cove is what you think. And again, why might that be? And maybe you think that people are going to be taking those bigger ones at the other site, but not this one. We don't really know the answer to that quite yet. That's what we're going to want your help with. We're going to figure that out today by collecting data as a group. So one of the things is I do want you to, if you have a piece of paper or something to write on, you're going to want that shortly. So maybe start making sure you have that soon. But at these two sites, we have a long-term data site that we always monitor the exact same area. So the exact same area in these rocks behind me, and the exact same area in the rocks behind Alex. And then I'll share a few photos so that you can see exactly what that data collection protocol looks like. Share some photos. Let's see. All right. So when we're down there, we're going to be looking for bolts in the rock. They're pretty unobtrusive. They're small, but we have GPS coordinates to go to them so we can find them. And that tells us our starting point to make sure we're measuring in the exact same spot every time. Here's some people measuring. That's another picture of what those bolts look like. As you can imagine, when we just go out there into the rocks, they can be really hard to find. But then based on those bolts at those little corners, we're going to set up a big block. And these blocks are going to be set up with transect tapes, basically just a really long measuring tape. And everything within that area, within those transects, is where we're going to count and search for owl limpets. So every single owl limpet that we can find in that big mega rectangle, we're going to count and record on our data sheet. And the square is always the same, so we're always counting the same populations every single time. We have a sampling area like this at both of our research sites. So once we have our transect tape set up and we're down in the tide pools, that's when we start looking for owl limpets. So I have a shell of one right here. The main way you identify them is by where the apex is, or the highest point of the shell. And for this, the apex is really far towards the front. So it's not in the middle like a volcano, it's like really far forward. If it's hanging a bit like this, I think of it as like a really nice hold. That's really the key feature. The really worn surface on top helps as well. And then as soon as we locate one, we want to measure how big it is. Since again, we're going to be keeping track of how many owl limpets we have and how big our owl limpets are. And we can do that using calipers. So these will help us measure anything that's inside it. So we can again measure kind of like, it's hard to do with only 2 hands. I wish that I had 4. Measure them like this. So if you can see, when it's closed, that little 0 with a tick mark beneath it at the top, it lines up with the 0. So that's what you're going to keep your eye on, is the 0 with a tick mark on the top. But when I open it up, where is that 0 tick mark lined up to now? So like right now, if my owl limpet was inside here, it would be 20 millimeters. You see the 20 lined up with our 0 tick mark? So that's how we're going to measure owl limpets. I'm going to share a couple practice photos with you before we head down to the tide pools to measure these together. So let me find our photos. All right, so we have an owl limpet here with our calipers around it. So again, look for the 0 at the very top of the calipers and see where that tick mark lines up to. The other thing is we're always going to round up. No matter how close it is to the tick mark below, we're always going to round up. So take a moment and see what in millimeters our little 0 tick mark lines up with. And then I added a little line in here to show. So it's kind of in between 54 and 55. So we're going to call that 55 millimeters for this owl limpet right here. And then let's look at another practice one. So again, find the 0 at the top and the tick mark beneath it and line that up in millimeters. And remember that we're going to be rounding up. So how big is this owl limpet here? Right about 39 if we round it up. All right. So that's what we're going to do for every single owl limpet that we find in the tide pools. And what I did is earlier I went down and recorded a video of me measuring with the calipers, but I didn't record any of the data. So I actually want your help today to be my data recorders. And you're going to help me write down those measurements and then share them with me later. So now's when you want a piece of paper, and I'm going to help you set up your data sheet so that when we go down below, you'll be ready to go. Share. All right. So on a piece of paper with something to write with, you're going to want to label the top of your paper so that you know what it is, the Crystal Cove Owl Limpet Survey. Then you're going to want to write which site you're at, which today is the one behind me. So Little Treasure Cove, and this is our low impact site. One of the most important pieces of data in science is always going to be the date. If we don't know what day we measured it, then our data is not useful at all. So you're going to write the date, which is today's date, November 16th, 2020. And then we'll just need 2 columns to record our data. It's super simple. The size in millimeters and the number of owl limpets. And the way that we're going to fill this out as you're setting that up is, let's say, for example, my test owl limpet here I know is 59 millimeters. So I'm going to write 59. And then in the number of owl limpets, I'm going to start with a tally mark because I have 1 owl limpet that was 59 millimeters. If I find another owl limpet that was also 59, I would add another tally mark. If I say found one that was 30, I had to write in a different measurement and do the same thing, tallying up all the owl limpets that were 30 millimeters. So that way we get 2 kinds of data, just like the 2 predictions we made. How many owl limpets are there? And how big are they? And what's their size distribution overall? Do we have more small ones or more big ones? So I'm going to hold this on the screen for just a moment to make sure that you have the time to set up your data sheet. And then we are actually going to go down into the tide pools via video that I filmed a little bit earlier. And you're going to be recording the data for me because I have not recorded the data for this yet. All right. So I will see you in a moment virtually behind me. If you're ready with your data sheet, we're going to be recording all of the owl limpets that we can find with the help of some UCI students that were down with me as well. So I'll share my screen. Everyone, I am now down in the tide pools where our owl limpet survey is going to take place. And I want your help today. So you can probably see the transect tapes laid out behind me that are basically just really long measuring tapes. Those are designating exactly where we're going to measure owl limpets today. So we're going to find every single owl limpet within this area, measure it, and record it on our data sheet. And I'm going to actually have your help to do that. So hopefully, like we talked about up above, we got our data sheet set up to help record our owl limpets. So what we're going to do is measure each one that we can find and then tally it on our data sheet. So Eric, come on over. We found like 3 owl limpets I can already see right in here. So I'm going to go ahead and use my calipers here, open them up, and try to measure from end to end on this owl limpet. We sometimes kind of tricky in the rocks. Hold on, I'm going to get a different angle. Okay. So then with our calipers, we're measuring, see where this 0 is at the top? That little tick mark, we want to see where that lines up to the millimeters up top. So right now it looks like it's just a little bit above 35, so we're going to go ahead and round that to 36. So then what I'm going to do is on my data sheet, I'm going to write 36 because I found an owl limpet that was 36 millimeters, and then add a little tally mark. If I find any other owl limpets that are 36 millimeters, I can add another tally mark. Or if I find a different size, I'll go ahead and write that in here. So now let's go ahead and measure the other one here. Same as before. I'm going to go end to end with my calipers. And then you're going to read out from that 0 mark what tick mark it's going towards, and you can round up. So I'll give you a moment to look at that. Write that down in your data sheet. If it's the same size, you add another tick mark. If it's a different size, you can write that down as well. The other thing is once we've measured them, we're going to use a marker. It's just a grease pen. It washes off when the tide comes in, but that lets me know that we measured it already. So I'll go ahead and do that for this one too, since you just measured that. Now let's do this other one here. Get that in there, end to end. And again, where that 0 mark, the tally comes straight down. Go ahead and write that on your data sheet. Cool. So those are 3 really close together. Let's keep looking for more, Eric. Scan around our rock. Oh, there's a big one over here. So here's another big owl limpet. We can tell it's an owl limpet because this really kind of points at the front. But you can see it's got a bunch of barnacles on it, which is really cool. But let's see how big it is. Okay, end to end. And then let's look at our calipers. and go ahead and write that measurement down on your data sheet and add a little tick mark. And then I can already see another one right in here. So let's go ahead, measure end to end. Some of these are a little tricky to get in there, but I'll do the best I can to estimate end to end. And again, where that 0 mark comes down, and go ahead and add it to your data sheet. And then let's see, there's more over this way. Tons of owl limpets, you guys. All right. Calipers. This one's got, even has other owl limpets on it, I think. That's really cool. They're little friends. And then go ahead and again record with that little 1 mark, which tick mark it is. Awesome. Look at this little one hiding in the rock here. So we've got another one to measure. Okay, where that 0 mark reaches. Go ahead and record that on your data sheet. I can see the biggest of all that I've seen today right over here, Eric. If you want to give us a look, you can see kind of next to my hand how big this one is. Let's see. I definitely think it'll be bigger than the other ones we've gotten. Again, where that 0 mark goes. And then go ahead and record that on your data sheet. We've got a few tucked in here that you may have noticed too. We don't want to miss the ones that are really tucked away. End to end, as best as I can. Record where the 0 mark hits our millimeters there. All right. Let's walk a little further down in our tide pools here. Oh, here's a really cool one. This one has some algae on top of it. So this one has stuff growing on it, but there is an owl limpet hidden in there. Again, you can see the really sharp front. Okay, where the 0 mark hits here, make sure to record that on your data sheet. And then I'm gonna check this little one here and see how big it is. But as you may remember, we're not gonna record one smaller than 25 millimeters. So let's see where my 0 mark hits. Not quite, it's a little bit short. So this one is too small to count just yet. That helps us make sure that we're counting only owl limpets, since owl limpets are really big. But as you may see, we got a nice big one in here too. So let's get all the way in there. All right. And then go ahead and again record where the 0 mark hits on the calipers and record that on your data sheet. All right. And let's see. I've got another little one right here. Eric, let's take a look and see if this one's big enough. All right, remember it's where the 0 is hitting. So record that on your data sheet. If it is over 25. All right, so we moved a little farther down in the tide pools and I can see a bunch more owl limpets in here. So we're gonna make some more measurements together. So let's start with this big one that I spotted right here. So I'll get my calipers from end to end. And then where the 0 mark is hitting, go ahead and record that on your data sheet. And then I can see more up this way. There's one all the way down in here. Let's see if we can get over to it, Eric. Sweet. One right there. Let's see where that tick mark falls. Record that on your data sheet. There's already another one right in here too. Some of these are a little awkward positions. Let's try to get in there. There we go. And then where that 0 mark is, record that on your data sheet. We've got another one all the way back up here. Again, ahead and record the size on your data sheet. And then there's another one down in here. Okay. And record where that zero mark is on your data sheet. All right. So together we're all taking on this transect, and you've been helping us record all of these owl limpets in here that we now have marked. But as you can see around the area, we also have some students from UCI helping us collect data, both master's students and undergrads. So we'll hopefully find all of the owl limpets in this whole area because there are a ton of them. So thank you for helping us with this today. All right. So again, thank you everyone for helping collect that data. If you weren't able to see every single measurement or write down every owl limpet, or if you don't think it's perfect, that is not a problem at all. One of the beautiful things about community science and the fact that there's a bunch of us recording this data today is that all together, if you all submit us your data, it's okay if you miss one or two because chances are someone else got that one as well. So we do want you to submit this data to us, and once you do, you can actually also help us analyze that data. So I'm going to share a link with you that you can write down on the bottom of your data sheet. So if you go to, we have a shortened bit.ly link here, as well as just our website in general, crystalcove.org. So if you write those at the bottom of your data sheet, you can go to that link, and there will be a form where you can enter in all of the data that you wrote down for those owl limpet sizes. And then you can also help us analyze the data. We have the Excel spreadsheets for all of the owl limpet data we've been collecting at Historic District, as well as here at Little Treasure. And you can help us figure out if there was a negative human impact at that historic site or not. We're not totally sure the answer yet, so that's a place where you can analyze it and share your results with us. So we would love it if you would, first of all, share your data, and then second of all, take on our Owl Limpet challenge to help analyze the data, because we really do want to hear what you found. That's one of the most important parts of our community science process, is collecting the data, but also then helping us analyze the data and share what you found, and that can help us better understand our MPA. So I can hold this on the screen for just another moment to give you a chance to write that down. And then again, thank you for helping me collect data, but for when you are analyzing it and heading over, you'll have a chance to share your hypothesis too. So share what exactly you think might happen, what sorts of trends we might see in that data. And I'm really, really excited to seeing what you find and hearing the data and trends that you see. So again, thanks for your help. And then I'll throw it back to Alex for a quick goodbye.
Thank you so much, Kaitlin. Wow, how exciting. I'm really excited to see the results of this survey and see what kinds of differences there are in the populations between these two impact sites. So thank you so much, Kaitlin, from the Crystal Cove Conservancy, our nonprofit partner, for helping all of our participants become citizen scientists. You guys are our future. You will be the scientists and environmental stewards of our future, protecting these marine protected areas and open spaces along the coast. So thank you so much for joining us today for our home learning program, Monitoring Human Impacts, here at Crystal Cove State Park's Marine Protected Area, or MPA. I'm going to put up on the screen again one more time Kaitlin's slide so we can show where you want to send your data. And then after this, I'm going to just share with you the link so that you can check out all of our other upcoming home learning programs throughout California State Parks, lots of different wonderful programs, different habitats, different programs as well. So I'm going to share that with you right now. This is where you would go to check out some of our other home learning programs, which are free for everyone right now. And lastly, I just want to say, when it's safe for you to come and visit, we want everyone to come and visit Crystal Cove State Park, because California State Parks are your parks, and we're waiting for you. The tide pool is right behind me. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Kaitlin.
Thank you, Alex.
And have
Thank
a
you, everyone.
wonderful day.
You as well.
Okay. Bye.